Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Richard Lewis Show. And I'm super excited for this episode because I'm going to be interviewing one of my favorite Twitter accounts on the platform. And, of course, not the account, but the man behind it. It is a chap called Neontaster. He's someone that it currently works as the associate editor at Tabletmag, but also in a prior to that being true, was just a great Twitter account that shares my interests of sort of breaking down media spin and political coverage. And I now know his name is Noam Blum as well. He was always Neontaster to me. Noam, it's great to have you on the show, man. I'm super psyched for what I think we're going to get into.
Thanks, Richard. Yeah, and I know, right? I was always like just like Mr. Red. I had some kind of weird random red helmet.
Was it a Deadpool type thing?
It's not a Deadpool type thing. It's actually from a movie. It's from an obscure Canadian movie from like 2011 called Beyond the Black Rainbow. It's sort of a weird science fiction artsy movie.
Yeah, you know what? I've seen it and never made the connection until now. I guess because you've been so long without the Avatar. But yeah, that's wasn't that by the director who did Mandy? Yeah,
correct.
Yeah,
Panos Cosmatos.
Yeah, I can never remember his name, which is probably very racist of me or something in this day and age. But yeah, love those films. I love that director.
Yeah.
Super.
And so you're right. Now I'm like now people know like my name and where I work and stuff. But yeah, if it was just like I'm still just doing my thing. I'd like to think that I'm largely the same that I've always been. I've actually kind of mellowed out a little.
Sure.
And even before I started using my real name and face, like my identity was starting to leak out as my Twitter and real world circles kind of collided because I moved to DC. I was not living in DC at the time, and then kind of slowly made friends who I knew on Twitter in real life too. And so, people talk, and I have a one story where somebody I worked with came to me one day at work and said, "Are you Neontaster?" And I said, "How do you know?" And he said, "Somebody told me the name." And he said, "But don't get mad at him. He was really drunk at the time." So like we went out drinking and he got really wasted. That was one of the things he let slip. And so that's how like word got around. And so, yeah, like I got a little more chilled out as, it was apparent that like people in my real life and stuff knew who I was. And I kind of matured a little, I feel like.
Yeah. Well, look, I wanted to get you on before the election because I just can't keep up with it. No one can keep up with this news cycle. It's so fucking insane right now, brother. And I've just got to get your overall thought about the state of American political coverage, because I think, honestly, it's always been a joke to us Brits and Europeans. Like, we've always laughed at the American media. Favorite albums of mine, I've got clips from like Fox News and GOP shows and stuff, and just how insane it used to be. But I think I've actually lived long enough to a time where I don't know if I'm losing my mind, but like every network feels like Fox now. It's just so hysterical, screeching nonsense every day.
It's weird how close we're getting to certain scenarios that like 20 years ago were comedic and satirical about the future, and it's going to be so crazy, and reality shows are going to take over. The Truman Show was written, I think, in like the mid 80s. The script for that was written in like the mid 80s, when it was some totally bizarre imaginary idea, and then along comes like reality TV and makes it seem a lot less like that. And now we're like way past that into like Idiocracy and, and all of these like just totally bizarre. Like, that's why the funny part is, it's become a meme how The Simpsons predicted a lot of crazy things that happens. And you need to look at it in the reverse. It's not so much that they predicted crazy things that would happen. They just acted as though crazy things would happen, and then crazy things just happened. Like, it's that, like their thought process was like, what would be an insane future scenario? I don't know, Donald Trump as president. And so like reality caught up to their idea of satire. And now we're living in it. And and then you got to throw in this pandemic on top of it.
Yeah.
And just, like I remember in January thinking like, well, here we go, election year. It's going to be crazy. And then little did I know that was only one level in the shit layer cake that we were going to be eating all year.
Yeah. So, I mean, listen, I know we were talking about this just before we went live, but I get a lot of criticism, for my alleged political views, which I think are opaque enough. Honestly, I don't think I talk too much about my views, or even I don't fuck with the politics so much. As a journalist myself, I'm interested in the way politics is covered by the American media, and honestly, I get lots of people like every day I'm called or an alt-right chud and a shit lib. I get it from both sides consistently because I'm kind of saying like your media preference is utterly fucked. There's nowhere where you can just go anymore, where you can get the objective truth without it being tainted by party politics in the US, or at least that's how it feels to me. I don't know if you
And
disagree with it.
and not to mention that you're right. There's this flattening where like there's this tendency to like reduce everything to these two big camps. And actually, in reality, I'm sensing that it's more splintered than ever. I mean, so look,
Mm,
I obviously come from a right wing environment. Like when I was growing up, I did not grow up in the United States. I grew up in Israel in a right wing household,
mhm.
and my American family is conservative and come from conservative thinkers and
Right.
writers and people who are in the political world and stuff. But now, my family includes people who are very pro Trump and people who hate Trump's guts with a fierce passion, like a fierce sort of never Trumpery passion. There it is. So it's actually less like it would have been truer in the past to say, like, oh, all of you just conservatives.
Mm.
And now I feel like half, like, yeah, my American family is conservative, but like there's like six different subsets of that within them right now because of the especially the last 4 years and like how much more splintered they made things.
Yeah.
And you're right. And so I obviously, like, I find myself sort of on the right of a lot of issues, but the thing is I'm more mildly on the sort of, I'm closer to the line than a lot of the people in my environment.
Sure.
And I feel a little less visceral passion about some of the very hot button American topics. I mean, obviously, I care about stuff like free speech and also including stuff like the Second Amendment. But there is something that I see in Americans who grew up here. This sort of it's sort of deeply ingrained. It's kind of baked into the American mindset. This sort of
Mm.
strong passion about these things,
Yeah.
and it's hard. I mean, that can create a lot of friction.
Why is Trump, the dividing issue, in the media? It's like it seems insane to me that like, I'm writing a piece about it right now and it probably won't get published anywhere, so I'll have to put it on my blog or whatever. Because people I find, all the connections I've got, they actually don't want to run kind of like what I would consider politically centrist opinions. Like, a piece is both critical of Trump and Biden. And what it really tunnels in on is this myth that Trump is this like fascist oligarch that like used Russian disinformation to sort of seize power of the American people. I mean, these things are all objectively nonsense. I don't think Trump is even the most fascistic American president in my lifetime. It's like Bush, committed war crimes and used the intelligence agency to mass spy on American citizens. Obama did 563 drone strikes, the most of any American president to date, resulting in the deaths of 160 children in Pakistan alone. Like I think when you start talking about the sanctity of the office, right? Like it seems insane to me that Trump is the breaking point for the American media when they've been asleep at the wheel for as long as I've been alive. Now, suddenly, they want to be the gatekeepers to stop this fascist uprising from a president that, honestly, I think 20, 30 years from now, we're going to look back and realize we were all hypnotized by some sort of mass hysteria, and he was actually fairly moderate in a lot of areas.
I do think you're right in that history will be a lot sort of kinder to Trump, just in the sense of like with some perspective, like the stuff that again, a coronavirus, but
Sure.
we're still so in the midst of it. I mean, by the end of COVID, you could have a situation where deaths in Europe have caught up to deaths in the United States because the rates of measures and waves are fluctuating at different rates, and so there could be some kind of almost regression to like a horrible mean. We don't know that yet, and so I'm saying like 30 years down the line, you look back. I mean, even now, like George W. People are like being nostalgic for George W. Bush.
That is so fucking mind blowing to me, dude. Like I have
like,
to remind
everyone's
people,
like, oh, he's so quaint. He's like a painter, and he's like polite.
Like, what like that guy? I like now. I don't know where you stand on George Bush. Obviously, we've never spoke about it before. But for me, he is the most evil. If that word is, not just an abstract concept, he is the worst president in terms of foreign policy, in terms of domestic policy, in terms of abuse of political power. I think he puts Nixon in the shade, frankly. And to see leftist media going, God, wouldn't it be great if we had that guy back in charge instead of this Trump dude? I'm like,
right.
What
And
the
so
fuck?
and so here's the deal. If you remove coronavirus from the equation for 1 second, up until that, I routinely said the main way in which Trump is like beyond the pale is just how he behaves. He's just an extremely brash, of unpolitical, like very not in line with what people envision a public figure needs to be, right?
Yep.
He's just this like loud and obnoxious, and he makes dumb mistakes and whatever. The corruption around him is very sort of unrepentant. It's almost like his big thing is like he just doesn't care about hiding it as much as it, like he just doesn't care about like the discretion that other politicians have about their corruption. But that turned the focus towards that so intensely that that suddenly Bush, with all the stuff that happened with Bush and with all the accusations and with all that happened throughout his 2 terms, the fact that he's mild-mannered suddenly is the thing you yearn for. And so, and that's exactly why I think, especially if, like I said, in the end, after all of the COVID totals are tallied, if it does turn out that the United States did not do exceptionally poorly compared to other places, then in 20 or 30 years, he'll look like, because it's weird. Like you can read about stuff that happened to presidents like turn of the century, turn of the 20th century presidents, and how they acted and kind of things that happened during their presidencies, and you just nobody remembers about it now. Nobody knows if me included, like I don't know if President Harding was particularly despised during his term. I have no clue.
I had a conversation about this with someone the other day, because they were talking about, again, this idea that they were adamant that Trump was eroding people's rights and civil liberties at a rate that no other president had done. I brought up that, Lincoln suspended habeas corpus, at one stage in American history. And they were like super shocked, because what you realize is, and sounds awful, there's no way to say it without sounding like a snooty European, but actually the media has got, and social media and tech have got such a hold on people. We constantly live in the moment, and I don't think we retain information anymore. The average American, I think, doesn't even know their own history beyond, even to the duration of their life, where they could be cognizant of such things. I think the last 2 years, maybe 4, and it's just going to stay like that until we start breaking down some of the apparatus that are causing us to think and live this way.
Yeah, there's this constant overload of information where, like in the old days, like you used to remember everybody's phone number by heart. And now, because there's a device you could go to, you no longer remember anybody's phone number. That also extends to like world knowledge, like the fact that you could just go Google stuff. And then once you introduce the fact that Google is now, can be an unreliable narrator, or Wikipedia can be an unreliable narrator, because politics and debate and semantics sort of get injected into those places too, that becomes a real issue. Where it's like, what do I trust anymore? I mean, the big one to me was that this is just such a terrible look. But during the Amy Coney Barrett confirmation
Oh,
hearings,
God.
when she used the term sexual preference to describe sexual orientation. And it created a minor storm, even though, again, if you go look on Twitter, the past 5 years, like 99% of the people who use it like to defend LGBT. So yeah, it's outdated. Yep. I mean, I understand the contention that like our language has evolved has developed like a more nuanced way to describe it than the word preference. Mm-hmm. But like the use of it in general, even leading up to this, was not like, oh, it's a preference.
Never had a negative
just used it because that was like the term.
Never had a negative connotation. I you know, and I'm like you. I can see the linguistic argument for let's update the language, you know, which happens every 5 years, right? Terms that, yes, exactly. You know, it's terms that are considered woke and
right.
politically
but
correct.
The problem became when Merriam-Webster's.com edited the page for sexual preference to include the description that it's an offensive term or something like that. And that is where things become really kind of, I hate to use the word Orwellian, because again, it's so cliche, and you feel like you're such a scaremonger idiot saying like, oh, this is just like 1984. But like, at what point is there nothing better to compare it to than that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like, at what point the other comparisons just fail?
Yeah. And that, you know, I covered that on my stream, you know, because it was like, here's 5 wacky things the media are doing now. And it was like, they had absolutely nothing, no real disqualifying, you know, kind of points about Amy Coney Barrett being put on the Supreme Court. I mean, the best you can argue, I think, is that maybe she's underqualified, but then you look at some of the other appointments and they're fucking, you know, just as, if not more so, underqualified, you know, historically. So that argument doesn't even hold up to any scrutiny. So they went with this absurd the linguistic trap was set, you know, and then suddenly the narrative, peddled by journalists, peddled by the usual blue checks on Twitter, was that this was actually the mask slipping for a fragment of a second, and it proved that she actually, because of her conservative values, hated gays. And look, we've now got a dictionary definition that verifies this. It was updated today.
Yes.
You know, that is I can't express how fucking insane that is.
Well, and also the framing of every political issue like this is though it is an issue that hinges on human rights. Is sometimes that's true. The problem is that when you say that all the time, what you're doing is it has like a chilling effect on which opinions people are allowed to have. Because I don't know, again, I'm speaking from somewhat of historical ignorance here, but the idea that your judicial philosophy is disqualifying in itself rather than something that you did that would disqualify you to sit on the Supreme Court. I don't know if that was ever really a thing. The idea that like, oh, we shouldn't confirm you because you're an originalist or something like that.
Yeah.
But when you start saying, you know, I think it was like Senator Ed Markey who tweeted something like, originalism is racist and it's sexist. And it's
Hillary Clinton did as well, by the way. She repeated that fucking stupid
and so
point.
The problem is what you're then doing is you're introducing entire judicial philosophies into like the bucket of what makes you unworthy of sitting on the Supreme Court. And again, this ties into this is like a dumb a dumb side event that happened with all this, but like the Girl Scouts of America tweeted an image celebrating Amy Coney Barrett and the 5 women who were elected to the Supreme Court. And by the way, they have a history of doing this. Like they did it for all 4 women last, and they did it for Hillary Clinton's birthday and all that stuff. And they got so much hate that they had to like delete their tweet
and apologize.
And people are still boycotting them. People were like, "Oh, it's not good enough. Not good enough, Girl Scouts." Because your social media manager decided to do a thing and they didn't consider your bizarro political outrage. And so now you're going to be slamming your door in like some 12-year-old Girl Scout. You want to buy some cookies? No.
It's so like, how does that, How does the Girl Scouts of America get politicized to that degree? Like, it's so ridiculous. And this is just something as well that I've noticed in American life in general. It was true when I was out there. You know, every Uber ride I took, like, people wanted to talk about politics, but were very cagey about revealing it. You know, I lived in Atlanta, Georgia, very liberal, very Democrat at the time. You know, I was out there during the 2016 election. Everyone was very pro Hillary Clinton, but was equally cagey about broaching the subject just in case they were talking to a MAGA or whatever.
Yeah.
And
I mean, now it's
now you have to, like, I've had people. I'm British. I've got no fucking dog in the fight. I think it's hilarious whatever happens. Frankly, I think you either elect, the liberal tears. If Trump wins 4 more years, is going to be delicious. I will enjoy drinking them. I'm not going to make any bones about that, because the full court press from the media and tech companies has been so disgusting to me. You get what you deserve in that regard. But if it's Biden, congrats. You've elected a neocon, traditional Democrat. The progressives who pushed him over the line are going to find out very fucking quickly that they're not going to serve any of their interests whatsoever. And there's also the fact that I do secretly suspect he has early onset dementia. So great job, Americans. Great job. So either way, I'm going to be streaming it, and I'm going to be fucking cackling.
the content isn't going to suffer either way.
No, totally not. But here's the thing. I've got British and European followers asking me to endorse someone. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? Why would my endorsement matter? B, why would a British guy living in Britain endorse someone for fucking president to his audience? Like, I couldn't give less of a fuck, frankly.
And like you said, for one, because you have what I would call sort of a very typical view of, for instance, like George W. Bush. The way you just described it is a way that I frequently hear from people, especially Europeans. And by the way, Americans who hate him will say different things.
Right.
When they explain why they hate him. And a lot of it goes back to domestic issues. There is a sort of a self-centered, everything in America is America-centric. And so even though they'll say like, oh yeah, he killed 1 million Iraqis, but it's the Defense of Marriage Act or the, I don't know what,
sure,
like that's the thing that really bugs them, is when he did whatever, that he likes oil, something like that. But unlike, let's say, George W. Bush, Trump's presidency didn't really radiate outwards to the world. Like there wasn't a war, which is a thing that would make the world super invested. Again, coronavirus, but everybody's dealing with it in their own countries. It is mostly about the culture war. Like even people who are online and people who are interested in like the machinations of pop culture feel very invested in the American political system. There's a lot of, and like you said, you're British, but like the number of people who comment on Twitter frequently are like big commenters on American current affairs. Many of them are not American. Some of them live here or have lived here, but it is, in the same way that like Hollywood set sort of the tone for like fictional media in the world for decades, like the American kind of culture battle lines are kind of the ones that the world aligns according to, sort of, not always, but largely. It's sort of the arena where everybody plays out their battles too. Cause like everybody was like, oh, Brexit. Everybody tried to
Americans talking about Brexit was fucking hilarious, by the way.
And everyone was like, oh, Brexit is Trump. Trump is Brexit. Everything is Gamergate. Everybody's like, everybody wants to tie everything into their own. Oh my God. The Trump/Brexit takes were just amazing.
It was, wasn't it? Like it represented somehow, despite the fact that all these things are not interconnected at all. It represents some sort of like populist uprising. So yeah, the things. I mean, and what I found was, now I was anti-Brexit just purely on economic grounds. I think once you start getting into this like philosophical idea about whether Brexit's secretly racist or not on some level, I just tapped the fuck out, because it was just, for me, what I was being told was that it was going to be bad for us economically. That is a prophecy that has been bore out, especially as we hurtle towards a no deal Brexit. But I won't bore you with that. But what I found was Americans were like, yeah, Brexit's racist. It's like, fascism's rising up across Europe. And I said, like, this. Do you understand what the European Union is? This is how it works, and this was like Britain's role in it, and we were kind of beholden to these entities, and they could stop votes on certain things, and we don't elect those European. And once you start breaking it down, like even like liberal Americans were like, oh my god, that's awful. Americans wouldn't want to live like. We couldn't have anything like that, right? And then suddenly you've converted a fucking lib into being pro-Brexit, which isn't even the standpoint I was. It was just I wanted to articulate kind of the other side's argument, even though I didn't believe it. And those conversations don't really happen anymore because, like you say, it's the culture war. Pick a side, fight it, and fight it to the death.
And there's and you got your one size fits all argument, which is it's racist and it's sexist and it's I don't know what. It's all about preserving structures of white supremacy and again it is an ineffective argument. The economic arguments were so much more convincing in the whole Brexit argument, and yet they were totally drowned out by talk of nationalism and blah, because it's easier. It requires less knowledge, because if you want to just start breaking down how the economy will be affected by Brexit, you actually have to know something about economics.
Sure.
You just say, oh, you're a bunch of racists is super, super easy.
Yeah, and
to actually know anything.
And it's a fundamental flaw in general. Like, if you want to bring people over to your side, like let me tell you, like I've covered the EDL and the rise of like British nationalism. Back when I was a younger man, I was out on the front lines bashing the fash, I guess, is the term the kids call it these days. But I remember when like the EDL came and wanted to attack Muslims, and I went and defended mosques in Birmingham. Not having that shit. Get the fuck out. I'll stand up for that. But if you want to, what you will all find among those morons is that they are economically disenfranchised, massively disaffected with the current state of politics. It's the classic, ignorant, ill-informed person projecting their anger onto a fictitious villain, essentially. And the economic arguments would have won you converts there in Brexit. If I'm not saying there hasn't been an uptick in British nationalism. I think the numbers might very well bear that out. I don't think it's a significant one. And certainly like parties like the BNP, actually, they don't get seats anymore in European elections. That moment has definitely passed. But it's this like idea of like, you're a red-faced gammon racist arsehole. Fuck you. We don't even want to win you over because you're such an irredeemable piece of pond scum. Like, I think once you present that as the like right way to think, you're never gonna convert people around to your way of thinking, which ultimately I believe should be the end goal. If you truly believe your philosophy, your ethos, your values are the right ones for society, the more people who share them, the better, right?
Yeah, and interestingly enough, there was a story recently where ContraPoints, the YouTuber, got chased off.
I think she's great, by the way. Yeah,
for sharing a cartoon. This was one of the most amazing controversies ever. I believe she shared a cartoon saying like, look, we're losing like the battle over hearts and minds to like neo-Nazis and fascists. And she shared this cartoon that illustrates it. And it was like a side by side of like a woke person and like a neo-Nazi talking to like an undecided voter, right? And the woke person is saying stuff like, I don't need to educate you. You need to educate yourself, and you got to shut up, and you got to. And the neo-Nazi saying stuff like, oh, you want to learn more about racial dynamics? Come, please, let's have a discussion. What do you, I know, meaning like they're so polite and they kill them with kindness, and we're being aloof and off-putting and mad at people who are like, because the word ignorant, it's funny to me that the word ignorant has a negative connotation. Like, you're ignorant. It's like, yeah, okay, cool. Teach. Like, it's not ignorant should be like a temporary state of being, it's not a pejorative.
Yeah.
Like, the idea is, yes, I don't know. Okay, tell me. But no, like it's become like no, you're an ignorant. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so
you're just cast out. You're just
right
there on the fucking ignorant island, and we're not sending boats out to you. You're never getting off that island. Yeah. But it's like, you're right. Ignorance is a concept. It's information defeats ignorance. So tell me, talk to me. No, we don't want to do that.
And Contra shared this cartoon and got chased off of because people said, "Oh, you're essentially accusing her of like praising neo-Nazis or making them look good," and I was like, and like chased her off. for making this precise point. Like our message is good, but we're delivering it in a bad way, and their message is bad, but they're delivering it in a good way. Yeah. And that's how we're losing out to them. That's a really important thing to say.
Yeah,
I mean,
totally.
I find sort of, like social progressivism to be extremely hard to understand because of that, because there's this sort of lack of desire, and often questions are perceived with like incredible suspicion, and they never assume you're actually trying to learn something or ask a question in good faith. There's always this like, what is the point of this question? What is this person baiting me into doing?
Yeah.
Or saying? I like often I find myself like, again, like, trying to have some kind of dialogue and just failing because from post to it turns into like this whole idea of you got to be defensive now because somebody's calling you a transphobe because you asked something that you don't understand about.
I mean, the trans topic that comes up, I'm like someone that's like, I try and educate my audience about issues, and I've got a lot of trans friends, and but when and they all say the same thing. They're like, God, we wish we had better spokespeople. We really do, because a lot of these people are so vitriolic right from the get-go. Like, this is a relatively new cultural phenomenon, and it's come a long way in a short time. And that unfortunately means that some of the people that are hating trans people, they are doing it again same way that your average gammon moron racist does. They're doing it predicated on the ignorance. They're doing it predicated on they watch one conservative video about how it means like predatory men in dresses are going to attack people in like toilets, this thing that like never happens. And yet it's presented up as just the normal byproduct of the existence of trans people. And also as well, the big trick in transphobia is the truly great transphobes, right? They make it look like they're being benevolent and concerned. That they say, oh, won't someone think of the children? These people are unwell. We've got to make them better. And society refuses to do that, and so that's a compelling argument because it appeals to empathy. So you get the duality of being phobic and empathetic at the same time.
And hiding behind it. I mean, that's where the church lady trope comes from, right?
Exactly.
Think of the children.
And so, it's like all the screeching in the world isn't going to help, because they've already got themselves entrenched in the ideal position where they can believe that something is wrong and actually attacking it is good. So you need to make a really strong argument, and you need to be patient. And I know it's hard when you feel marginalized to want to do that, but all the truly great speakers that have changed society's attitudes down the years, they've all had that quality of being a great patient orator and understanding change is gradual. It doesn't happen in seconds. You've got to keep working on it.
And there's also a tendency to there's this fear of focusing on, like you said, on like how much things have come and how quickly, almost as though if you do that, all of a sudden, like you'll take your eyes off the ball of like getting to the mountaintop, right? You're like, I'm only halfway there. I don't want to focus on how far I've come. I need to focus on how much more I have got to go. The problem is you're perpetuating the idea that there is never any progress being made. Which sucks because people do feel like they're making progress, and then when they're told no, you're still exactly the same kind of homophobes and transphobes that you've always been, because you're not pleasing the most extreme outlier of like online rabid activism, right? We're not talking about your average trans person who just wants to live a normal life. We're talking about people who are like professional agitators. And so many of those, and are fighting for trans rights. That's fine. Like I don't. Some of them are grifters, obviously, but some of them do. Some of them are obviously like motivated by true passion, but like you said, are serving as poor spokespeople. And just it sucks. And it all comes back to how toxic social media is, and it's developed into, unfortunately, it's kind of evolved into this system that benefits from the toxicity. It almost underwent this like bizarre evolution. Like the ecosystem evolved clickbait, and it evolved the way that things are shared, and it's this kind of pressure cooker. And there are all these organisms that found ways to feed off of that energy, like the clickbaiters and the influencers, and there's people who are like, paid influencers and stuff like that. It is like it's like one of those what do you call those vents in the bottom of the ocean, right, that spew all kinds of nutrients. And so like little colonies of life kind of build up around that source of energy. That's how I feel like social media is, and it's a real problem. We're in this like weird societal transitional phase where society's moving quicker than we can kind of adapt to it. And so I don't know where we're still like spinning on the roulette wheel. We still haven't stopped on a piece yet.
Yeah, well, I think so. One of my other recurring things that I bring up, and I'm absolutely adamant about this, so I don't know if you disagree. Obviously, it's perfectly acceptable. It's a working theory, and I'm certainly not even qualified to have come up with it. I recognize that, but I am utterly convinced that there is something in the way that social media operates that we weren't cognizant of when we created it. I definitely think they know about it now, the companies that run it, but to sort of say it would be taboo because you would need to start thinking about how you combat it. But I think it's leading to a spiral of just mental illnesses that that are undiagnosed. And, you see people like you can't even present them with objective reality anymore. It's like the social media spin is all that they need and want, and anything that doesn't fit in with what they've come to believe as a result of this constant barrage of information that's warped their minds is actually harmful to them. It's like waking up a sleepwalker. They don't want it. They absolutely not. I do it every day. I engage with people, but I think a lot of these people are sick. I honestly do. I think social media has fucked people's brains to the point where they can believe even incredible, fantastical nonsense that is easily disprovable with just 5 seconds in reality.
And like I said, it all happens so quickly. Society can't really adjust as quickly to kind of match it. There's actually a really good science fiction novel called Seven Eves by Neil Stephenson. And I think it's being made into a movie like by Ron Howard. But like one of the most amazing things in it is that it presents this scenario in which basically social media almost leads to the extinction of humanity. Okay, I'll be very abstract about this because to explain the details is essentially to explain the entire plot of the book. Right. But what he then does is he does this like thought experiment where he envisions how a society would evolve after having suffered that kind of like near miss with extinction, and develop this aversion to instant mass communication and become a highly advanced society in other ways. And so then he like skips ahead like way forward in time to a society that has like interstellar travel and robots and stuff, but they have like an iPhone in a museum because they can't even they're so afraid of like instant mass communication that they don't even know how to recreate those things. Like and in the same way that there are technologies that we consider taboo, like chemical weapons, and maybe in the future, like human cloning and stuff like that. And he even creates a name for this. He calls it Amistics, from the word Amish, who have certain technologies that they just avoid. And so he invents like a school of thought for this, where like if a society almost gets destroyed because of instant mass communication, it might develop like a societal taboo about instant mass communication. And I do think that something like that might happen. Like we might reach this this inflection point where we suffer this like collective trauma because we're all on social media all the time, and maybe like develop some kind of new modes of thinking about it that are not as free for all as they are now.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a little like the wild. Yeah,
I was just gonna say I'll have to check the book out, because I mean it sounds kind of like, I mean, obviously I wouldn't take it to the extreme that we're, that the author there has. But I'll certainly say, like, I think we're going to have to regulate it, not on the basis that is currently being discussed, like, does big tech have too much overreach, censoring information, 230 repeal, all that nonsense, but actually on health grounds.
Yeah, it is such a big part of life. There is gonna have to be, again, either through law, because like you're allowed to drink alcohol whenever you want, right? You're allowed to wake up in the morning and have a bourbon with your breakfast. And if you're not stumbling around in work, you're allowed to do that. And yet we as a society have developed a set of standards that says that, you don't. It's unhealthy, and it has the potential to get you in trouble, and it has the potential to create problems in your life. And there's certain things that you shouldn't do while you're doing it, all kinds of stuff like that.
Yeah, I think we need to, certainly as well, like it horrifies me, like kids straight on it. Like, you see kids these days, 8 years old, have their own phone, internet access, signing up for social media accounts when they're young, and just going out there on the internet because parents are so sort of ignorant. Or no, I don't even want to say ignorant, actually. I think in a lot of cases, maybe just not, because they themselves use these things, they don't really understand the harm. And
so we're going to get into second generation, into like people who grew up with social media, who now have kids. That could actually help. And it's funny, I always try to think about stories that I hear like this about things like in the past. For instance, what you're saying is like reminds me of all of these stories in the past. Like, for example, in America, they used to have devices in shoe stores, little like x-ray machine things where you would stick your foot in and you would see like an x-ray of your foot. And kids, this was like in the 60s and 70s or whatever, and kids would just like stick their head under there or their hand just to look at the screen and the skeleton, because nobody knew that it caused cancer. And so or like all these cars that were just like death traps before, stuff like crumple zones, airbags, and so that's where we are right now. It's kind of like the Wild West, like we're in the period where a new thing happened, like a new technology, and we're not really aware of the things that it could do. And in the past, it used to be like stuff like that, like, oh, it caused cancer, like the radium girls, that very famous story where I think this was like the first like union type like worker lawsuit in America, was that they in order to make watches glow in the dark, they used to paint them with radium, which is radioactive.
Yes.
And what the women would do that in the watch factory, and because it was little teeny tiny things, they would like paint the radium, they would dip it in water, and they would stick it in their mouth.
To like
and
wet
they
the
all got cancer.
It's so
from it.
up.
And sued, and so I'm saying, like, so in the past it was stuff like that. Oh, we didn't know about radiation, and now there is something more intangible that we don't yet understand about, like the way it affects like the neural network of society. And in 20 years, there's going to be psychological books. People are going to say, like, could you imagine that kids just had Twitter? And, like it's not that it's going to be illegal. It's like people are going to look at it and go like, wow, parents just let their kids use their phones with no supervision. Like, that's so weird.
So, hey, it's not a smooth segue, but let's do it anyway, because I honestly do. Like, what a great conversation this is. In lockdown, I've been starved of attention, so this is so great for me. Like, thank you, nourishing my soul. But look, so there's a lot of talk right now about social media and its role in censorship of information. How censorious does it need to be? Does it need to be censorious at all? Should we repeal the Section 230 protections, which to my mind is an inelegant suggestion for the problem, and I don't think one that really solves it. But anyway, like, so this all comes off the New York Post stuff.
Right.
Do you have in your mind a way to sort of fix this issue? Because I do sympathize a little bit with some of these tech oligarchs, which might seem wild. But, you know, I saw Jack Dorsey looking like fucking Rasputin the other day. It made me feel great about my beard. And he looks so jaded and pissed off to have to be there again. But they're getting it from both sides. The Democrats telling them, you're not being censorious enough. You're helping Trump. You're helping fascism. We're going to get you when we get in power. And the Republicans are saying you're censoring conservative voices. You can't do this, and we're going to repeal 230. And I think they're like, what the fuck do you want us to do? You know, like, right. So I have a little bit of sympathy for the Zuckerbergs of this world and the Jack Dorseys to a certain degree.
It's another.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to ask you, can this problem be fixed?
Well, it's another aspect of this thing we're talking about, and how we lag behind like evolving reality with stuff like law and my view on this is this: we are too trapped in old categories. We're still trying to fit this into one of two old categories, which are public utility and private organization, right? Is this like the electrical grid, or is this like a supermarket that tells you got to wear a mask when you come indoors? And because of the fact that this is like a new thing, it doesn't really fit either of those categories, I think. And the big writer's strike that happened years ago, this is like 2000
it was
or something like that.
Yeah, I was gonna say 6, but yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, it feels like another world, doesn't it?
One of the big reasons for that strike was that writers were being stiffed of everything that was like streaming and digital, because their old agreement, their old like collective bargaining agreement, was written when that didn't really exist. And it was written in like archaic language that basically allowed studios to like not pay them anything for streaming, even though it should be like now you and I understand on a totally instinctive level that you should be paid royalties if somebody streams something on Netflix in the same way that you should if it's played on TV. But because streaming on Netflix wasn't a thing when that our agreement was written, it was written in a language where then they were like, I know we don't have to do this now.
Yeah.
And so, they rightfully wanted that and got it. And I think we're in a similar sort of situation now where what we need new language. We're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. We gotta carve out a new square peg, which is, yes, you're a private entity, but again, if Twitter can influence elections, if Twitter is in such a situation where it needs to like censor certain information and stuff because it's afraid it'll throw elections or whatever, then what you're doing is I said my big problem boiled down to this. Once Twitter starts officially labeling things misinformation, then the things that aren't labeled misinformation are de facto valid information.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's really dangerous, especially, and by the way, forget bias. Let's not even get into bias. Let's just get into the volume and how you moderate that kind of volume of content. And I've had to do content moderation in my professional life for things that are nowhere near on the scale of fucking Twitter as a whole, and we're still impossibly large tasks. Any moderately popular Facebook page is a full-time job to moderate comments on. Yeah. Like you just need somebody sitting there at all hours of the day, or you just give up on it entirely. And once a week you go through the reported posts, something like that. And so you're painting yourself into a corner, and that's really bad. And they're doing it in this like ad hoc way. It's constantly reactive. They never roll out a thing before they use it. It's always like they got to scramble to do something. Okay, we're going to censor Trump's tweet. Oh, wait, we're going to add a warning, actually. No, we're going to do this. Okay, we changed our TOS. It's like they're never thinking ahead. They're always trying to patch up a hole. And obviously it always affects only one side, right? Yeah. It is an undeniable truth that the people on the right side of the map are always swimming upstream with this stuff. That doesn't mean that people on the left side of the map don't run into difficulty, but when they try to overcome that difficulty, they're swimming downstream, not upstream. Like they have, you know what I mean? Like they have that a momentum of social media that kind of flows kind of leftwards anyway. And yep, but when people on the left encounter problems with social media, they tend to get facilitated much quicker and much smoother. It's much more of a rocky road for a conservative to get unbanned or to get, I don't know what. But you can't nationalize it. It is a private organization.
Yeah.
And so, like I said, I think we need to develop some kind of rule set for these major spheres of global discourse. I mean, when you're like, I think the United States has already passed that Rubicon. I don't know about other countries, but once a United States court ruled that the president cannot block people on Twitter because it somehow is improperly denying them access to him, then we've already entered we've already crossed, we've already crossed the Rubicon into talking about Twitter as some kind of major conduit between world leaders and people. And so you got this like filter in the middle, which is the company itself. And so what I was saying when that whole controversy exploded was this: the problem is that the moderation process is opaque. Who decides what is COVID misinformation? Whose job is it? And now, if that's somebody's job, can somebody above them overrule them? Can Jack Dorsey call that person and say, yeah, no, I want you to unblock that post about COVID because I'm the CEO? Is he allowed to do that? I don't know. That's what I'm saying. The problem is that they say we ruled this misinformation and they don't got to tell you why. And if they were a supermarket and they said, put on your mask and we don't have to tell you why we want you to wear a mask in our supermarket, that nobody would be having this discussion. But that's because it's not, again, we need a new category for it. It's not the same thing as just that.
Yeah, and like that's something that I find super annoying. It's come up with what I do with like gaming and esports a few times, when I'm like covering legal cases. For example, we had a situation where like a professional Fortnite player was embroiled in a lawsuit against his like employer, the gaming organization that employed him to play, and they were citing the talent, the Californian Talent Agency Act as a disqualifying thing. Well, I mean, that doesn't apply to professional gaming, but it's the best we got. So, we can make a legal argument for it. Now, what we need to do immediately after that, and it's not a big enough legal case to justify it, is we need to update all the legislation. We've got to get on it now, toot sweet. But like you say, we're hurtling so quickly with all this emerging tech and issues that it's throwing up that it would be impossible. By the time the legislation was, complete, it would be out of date. So that's where we're at.
Only now they're starting to address the idea of like traditional college sports and the idea of like college athletes being able to like license their, like their appearance and get endorsement deals. Only now. This is a multi-billion-dollar, like people live for college football, and it's taken this long to just now start to deal with this stuff. It's glacially slow, and technology moves rapidly quickly, and I do think that the biggest help, grassroots help, is going to be a second generation, is going to be people who grew up. I tell this joke a lot about how there's this meme where it's like a side by side, and one side says, 2020. Hey, I found a picture of grandma and her friends, and it's like an old black and white photo of like respectable ladies having tea. And then it says like 2080, I found a picture of grandma with her friends, and it's like some girl in a bikini doing like a keg stand on TikTok. But it's like, but I'm saying like once a bunch of people grew up in a world where now they gotta, because every presidential candidate is going to have some embarrassing social media thing. Every politician is going to have a history of the weird, bizarro shit they did on social media. That'll like I said, people will start to understand that you can't just walk around drunk all day, even though you're technically allowed to.
Yeah, we're seeing that with Trump, actually. We're sort of seeing the emergence of that in real time with the meme, there's always a tweet, because Donald Trump was very active on social media, kind of ahead of the curve in a lot of ways for a celebrity of his age, of his years. And people are now retroactively going back and using it as a stick to beat him with for all the rank hypocrisy that he talks, So...
Yeah. It is. It's interesting. It might, in the long run, like we said, we started off by saying that history will probably remember Trump in less severe terms than like the people now look at it as. In fact, the fact that he was such an extremely online president might help accelerate, like you said, this process of like understanding that that's not good. Just having had this experience and other things in it, it's just the era. Because I also found the story about the Conways to be a very good illustration of why extreme online public life is just not good. Because they were they're at each other's throats publicly. She works for Trump. He's a big Trump opponent. And then her daughter now is like a big TikTok star, and she's posting the TikToks of her mom yelling at her. And it's ugly, and it's voyeuristic, and it feels dirty, and people love it as political ammo. It's just sad.
Yeah.
And I really hope that like a lot of people who are not extremely online, just watching it from the side, just see it as like a cautionary tale. It's like, oh, I'm not raising my kids like this. And my brother does not post anything about his kids on social media. They have zero social media presence. I know a bunch of people who do this now deliberately. And so, like I said, 10, 20, 30 years when those people are then running the world, and maybe they would have grown up in a world where like responsible habits are a little more ingrained in you, like from childhood. Like don't, like your dad saying to you, don't post that on social media, in the same way that, I don't know, like they would tell you to not be rude to adults.
Make sure you brush your teeth, things like that.
Exactly. Like if your parents would say like, don't be rude to your friend's mom if you go to his house, or in the same way, like don't be rude on social media. You're not allowed to. You're gonna get grounded if you're rude on social media. I don't know, something like that.
Yeah. Well, the New York Post found that out. Which brings me sort of to the last topic, really, that I want to broach before I let you get back to your normal life. Is as normal as anything is at the moment. Yeah, exactly. Is this the Biden bombshell, which to me was a nothing burger. I think the story in and of itself would have maybe done 6 to 12 hours of a regular news cycle the way things are at the moment had the media just covered it. But then the story became the non-covering of that story, and now they are locked into this holding pattern where they have to continue to not cover it as more and more things come tumbling out, and you are literally seeing essentially in real time, a media that is like so dialed in to getting Biden over the finish line, they're going to ignore a story that actually would give them, loads of content, loads of views, loads of clicks. It's detrimental to their own business to not cover this story. Yet that's where we're at. And, even repeating nonsense like it's Russian disinformation, even though as of the time of recording this, just before you came on the show, FBI have confirmed that, we're investigating Hunter Biden and his associates. Those associates could include Joe Biden, so.
And you're 100% right. A thing that scared me, a post 2016 news cycle that I remember seeing and being worried about for this election was that there was this self-flagellation over having covered Hillary's email story at all. Like no matter that, like the problem became there was too much coverage of it. Forget what kind, because the New York Times and MSNBC and Vox did not hammer Hillary over her emails. They defended Hillary over her emails, but that still was then later seen as part of the problem. It kept it a story. Yep. And I remember at the time thinking, what's going to happen is as we move closer to 2016, the strategy is going to be to ignore stories. So not even carry water, but just act like, nope. What? Hunter who? Never heard of him. And that's unfortunately this kind of played out in a very public way and in a way that people are noticing. I keep saying because a lot of the counter arguments I hear are counter arguments that you can sum up in Biden's going to win anyway.
Yeah.
And I say to that two things. One, who knows?
Yeah, I mean,
I was on a different podcast yesterday, and I for the first time ever, I actually I really thought back to how I felt before 2016, and I was so sure he was going to lose.
Yeah,
like
same.
I was 100% sure. And I'm saying my gut is that he's going to get crushed this time too. But this time I'm not. Like, I'm afraid to trust my gut. And so, but the second part is it doesn't matter, because journalism is going to be here after Trump. Yes. And if you give people a pass for doing shitty journalism because of Trump, they're not going to just stop. They're not going to just wake up the day after the election and go like, okay, Biden's going to be president, back to being ethical. It's like, that's not like, you open those doors and then they never get shut again. In the same way that politicians, you give politicians power and they never give it up. If you give media the leeway to act in sort of in a politicized way like this, they're just going to keep doing it. And a thing that we discussed also before we went live is a thing that just happened today, which is that Glenn Greenwald resigned from The Intercept, a website that he co-founded.
Exactly.
Now,
crazy.
Now, don't want to get into the weeds of the argument that Glenn Greenwald had with The Intercept, because who knows? It's like, to me, it seems from reading his piece and reading their response, seems to have been something that's been bubbling for a while. But the point is, he was willing to blow it up like that over Joe Biden of all things. But there has developed this group of kind of dissident-y people on the left, Greenwald and also Matt Taibbi, and also Andrew Sullivan and Michael Tracy and all kinds of other people like that who don't
Lee
fit
Fang,
that mold.
Another one, I think.
Oh yeah, Lee Fang, sure. People who just are just not on board, who don't like this idea of like, okay, we have a task to achieve, and our task is Donald. And look, I get it. I understand why, if you're in media, if you're a journalist and that's your life and your career and you like it, I understand why you think that attacks on journalism are like an abnormally large story. And two, I understand why it might be personally important for you to get rid of a president that you perceive as like a threat to your profession. Like, I get that mindset, but you can't let that change the way you work.
No,
like that's a big problem.
And I've said this a lot, like, I was very fucking serious about what I was getting myself into. I knew when I became a journalist that I was essentially, there was going to have to be some part of myself that was essentially surrendered and cast away, never to come back, because I served the readership. And I look at it like a solemn oath. I think that's probably a little bit cornball these days, but I swore to myself that I would never be swayed. I would deliver the truth. I would take on difficult stories, and even in like something as fucking ridiculous as competitive gaming is, I've legitimately tried to do that and made myself hugely unpopular in the process. I'm only now getting sort of any kind of recognition as being anything other than a blight, so it's like, on an industry, like, people used to tell me all the time, you can't tell the truth, Richard, the industry's not robust enough. Well, I'm like, if it's not robust enough for the truth, it doesn't deserve to exist. That's my philosophy. And it's inconceivable what these American journalists are doing on a daily basis.
And once again, this is eventually like we're spinning around the same like drain, which is social media. And the problem here is that journalists on social media use social media both as their professional platform and as like a jumping board for their personal brand. And that is a huge conflict of interest and a huge problem. And that's what created the problems for the New York Times with like Felicia Sanmez. I don't know if you remember that Kobe Bryant died this year, by the way.
I know, man.
I know, right? And there was back when we were all naive spring children, Kobe Bryant died, and Felicia Sanmez like decided that was a good time to like mention his rape trial.
That was fucking absolutely outrageous.
And they could not even suspend her. They tried, they were like, we're suspending her because that's bullshit on social media and whatever. And the uproar that caused, and that's the problem, was they painted themselves into a corner where their staffers are now influencers, powerful social media influencers, and they're now beholden to their newsroom. Like the New York Times is beholden to Taylor Lorenz because she has a big Twitter following. And if she says something, they're going to get a lot of cancellations or whatever. So they got to do what she says. And, like when Barry Weiss left the New York Times, the story she told there was that, and this was also like confirmed in another article where people were trashing her like in a Slack, and a boss would come in and say like, hey, can you please maybe stop this now? And I'm thinking to myself, what kind of workplace does the boss not come and say, hey guys, the next person who trashes a coworker in here is fucking fired?
Yeah, right. And that I mean, I didn't have journalist civil war on my 2020 checklist. I'm not gonna lie, that whole story was insane. But like the reality as well, though, was like that blog she put after that. I don't like Barry Weiss really. And I think she's been part of the problem that actually came back and bit her in the ass. There's like a comic element to it for sure, but like what she wrote should, like at that point, it's got to snap you out the spell. Like the people you are pandering to are the people that are coming up, taking your job, and then kicking you out on your ass for having like real mild fucking opinions that just don't align with theirs. And the New York Times has fallen. The newspaper of record. The Washington Post continues to embarrass itself with like austere scholar and nonsense like this. And American journalism is in fucking big trouble, man.
Yeah, and I do think that this like massive migration to places like Substack is going to create a lot of crap, but it is also going to create a lot of not crap. And I remember, I wish I could remember the wording of the tweet that I did like years ago so that I could go find it. But I remember saying like, the collapse of journalism like this, it does present this opportunity for people who aren't like that to grab the bull by the horns and be like, this is a great opportunity for me to shine because I'm not, like an unethical grifter. And it is important for me. And I find myself nodding and agreeing with people I never thought I would nod and agree with.
I know.
And
horrifying.
People I still dislike. Again, I don't like Glenn Greenwald one whit, but he says a lot of things that are very true. And
he seems to be one of the few lefty journalists that acknowledges that like Republicans, we know what Republicans get up to, but like, why can't we say the DNC is now a provably corrupt political institution? It is. And there's been documented evidence of this for fucking, obviously way beyond the last 4 years, but these 4 years.
And the Russia, Russia is a big bone of contention over there because and again, I'm not going to speculate on anybody's motives to defend or attack Russia, but the valid kernel of what Glenn Greenwald and his sort of group say is that this really is sort of like a Red Scare. This really is like McCarthyism and like everything's Russia's under your bed and Russia ate your homework and whatever. And that's really, it's damaging, and it also sounds kooky. And just like this Hunter Biden stuff, where immediately, and yes, I understand that Rudy Giuliani, and I get like where the idea is to say that it's Russian disinformation comes from. It's not invented out of whole cloth. But once people in positions of authority tell you, no, it's not that, you stop saying it.
Yeah. And also, for me, I think the tipping point where I realized journalism was kind of like irredeemably corrupt and was an institution that couldn't be like salvaged. We're at the stage now, it needs to be completely broken apart. These people need to be fired. New, ethical editors need to be instilled at all these publications. Like it needs to die to be reborn. That's my mindset towards it. But the moment I knew was the Assange situation, where, you know, like it was unthinkable to me that journalists wouldn't want to support somebody who is, no matter how you want to define it, a journalist being persecuted for releasing information about governments. But they say because he helped Trump get in with the Hillary revelations, he deserves this. He's not a journalist. He's not one of them because he doesn't subscribe to the same political orthodoxy. That's staggering. That is horrifying.
And yeah, it's the like I said, it's the entanglement of the professional and the personal, and the fact that a lot of people who are in journalism now feel like it's their mission, and and unfortunately, there is also this atmosphere where, like you mentioned, Lee Fang, he got canceled for interviewing some dude, some black guy who was like, oh, when black people kill each other, nobody cares, or something like that, just for interviewing some dude who said that.
Yeah.
He was accused of being racist, and just like for airing this one guy's like opinion, somebody who is black and is local to that area, and was like, this is frustrating to me because like other stuff happens and we don't get all this like support from outside. And that was called racist because racists use like the black on black crime umbrella to like concern troll over stuff like that. Exactly. And so because that narrative exists in the world, he's strayed into that. And then now I mean, come on. I mean, that was crazy. And by the way, a lot of people also air their personal grievances because the people who attacked him clearly also had like personal workplace problems with him. Yep. I've had that shit too, by the way. Like I've had people say stuff about me on Twitter before that is because of personal disagreements that we have. Mm-hmm. And it's, and so then it's very easy for them to like paint. And this also, by the way, happened with Barry West. People were like, oh, I once pitched her a thing and she was a bitch to me or something like that. And it's like in life, like how many times did somebody email you something? Maybe you forgot, you got 16 emails that day. Your dog died that day, so you weren't reading your emails. I don't know what happened or whatever. And then you're all of a sudden like in the middle of getting canceled. And so that person is like, oh, here's my story about how that person was an asshole to me. And like, who knows if it's real or not? Like, nobody cares.
That's a classic thing. Like, you know, anytime you're being canceled, the dog pile is real. Like everyone,
just throw some more wood on the fire.
Happened to me a number of times. You know, when I read things about myself again, it's like, really, like this is fucking so fantastical. Some of it, like sounds. I wish I could be this cool. You know, like I wish I could be this much of an asshole. It'd be great. But yeah, you know, I've had that happen to me as well, man. And it's just so. You know, there's a word there, isn't there? Like, and it's pettiness. And that's where we're at. Like the average American journalist is a fragile, petty, unethical liar. I mean, that's the breed, right? That's what we're talking about. And I don't understand how that pathology, you know, those traits have become the defining characteristics of what was, for me, one of the most noble professions that we had. It's crazy. It really is.
Well, it is. It's a very well. The pool, the societal pool that is used to like draw out journalists is very narrow now too. They all come from like very similar socioeconomic backgrounds. They all go to the same schools. They all live in the same neighborhoods, and that's a huge. I'm sure. By the way, I'm sure that's a huge. Like, I don't know how like endemic the problem is in England, but I am sure that like,
you have to live in London.
Like in the, like people who live like in the countryside in England, like some Londoner or whatever doesn't know what the fuck their priorities are.
I remember London and home counties. So basically the affluent areas in the South. And this is one of the reasons why a lot of issues that are kind of like unique to people in the Northeast and like people from Wales, you know, they don't get covered. It's not relevant, you know. It's just
And so and you have that, you have like entire sort of entire like segments of society that are very underrepresented because they're, you know, because who cares about white Midwestern Christians? They're, even though they're like a big, you know, they're big voting groups, they're big economic, they have like big economic contributions. It's a population. And there is this perception that like certain certain segments of the population, like who gives a shit? Like who gives a shit about them? Like I care about what goes on where I live and where everybody I know lives. You know, it's this cliche of they used to say like when Nixon won the election, this was like a meme at the time where people were like, how did he win? I didn't know. I don't know anybody who voted for Nixon, you know, like that was, and so that was used as like evidence that the win was somehow weird as opposed to that you're living in a bubble.
Yes. Yeah. I don't know, man. Like I have real fears and you know, the Glenn Greenwald stuff today, you know, him resigning from a publication he co-founded. I mean, I think it just shows how far the rot has gone. The idea that the Intercept that he founded of all things would be sort of like cloaking information and asking him to edit articles so it was just slightly more favorable to Joe Biden, their preferred candidate. Like if it's happening there, what is happening at something like, you know, CNN, which has a vested interest in just, you know, bombing Trump every time they get a chance.
Right. And places where there is no friction like that, meaning like where there isn't even anybody around who's like pushing against a force like that because they aren't even there. Yep. And like I said, I don't know you know, I don't know what long-standing problems Glenn Greenwald might have with like the people at The Intercept. But, and also I was saying today on Twitter, like, because people were like, oh, Glenn, he's a hero and he's brave. And I was like, he'll be fine.
Yeah,
he's going to make $500,000 on Substack. Yeah, he's going to make hundreds of thousands of dollars on Substack. He's fine. Like it's not that he took some kind of huge personal or professional risk in doing this, but it's a gigantic shitstorm. Like, and you can't like downplay, like you said, the place that he helped co-found. He won his Pulitzer there. Like, I mean, not just, it was not a nothing place. Like, you know, the name is known because of Glenn. And so the fact that he was willing to blow up that relationship over a Joe Biden story to me is substantial, even though, because I saw some people act like, I think it was like Chris Hayes, who just like posted like LOLs when he heard the story. Like that was his only comment on it. Like everybody was like, oh, it's so performative. He just wants to do the thing. And they said that the same thing about Andrew Sullivan when he left the New Yorker, and this, because they feel like, oh, I'm being censored. But it's, again, you're talking about somebody who's willing to stand up and say like, fuck this place that I worked for years.
Built.
Yeah. No, for Glenn Greenwald, yes. Sullivan
Sullivan
wrote for the New Yorker for, I don't know, many, many years.
And
so it was just this idea of like, oh, this like long standing, like my name has been associated with it for years. And I'm willing to say, fuck them over this. Yeah. That to me is a big story, no matter whether he's actually risking his career or not. Because again, there are like, I'm not expecting anybody to go hungry. You know, like I'm not demanding that you go hungry.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily measure, because that's also, by the way, a thing that people do today is they tend to measure the magnitude of what you did based on how inconvenienced you are. You know, it's that argument of like, oh, he only gave this much of his net worth to charity. You know, like if like Jeff Bezos will give like, I don't know, $100 million. People say like, that's still only 0.1% of his net worth, as though it's only it's only significant if he feels the loss. You know what I mean? Like if it's a loss that he feels, then it's something that's worth it. If he can give you $1 million and not notice that $1 million are missing, then he didn't give you enough. Why though? Like who decided that it needs to hurt, like a move needs to hurt you in order to be something significant, you know?
Yeah, like, if you're not a martyr, then the gesture's meaningless, essentially.
Yeah, unfortunately, only big, powerful people today are in a position to do that. And like, for instance, like whatever you might think about J.K. Rowling, the undeniable fact is that she's only in a position to be able to say like, yeah, no, I feel like this and I'm not like, I'm going to hold on to my opinions because she's a fucking billionaire.
Yeah.
Like that's the thing. Like she would not be able, whether, like I said, whether or not you think she's right or wrong, she's only able to stick to her guns like this because there's no way to hurt her financially. That's it. That's ultimately, that's where everybody's going to try to hit you. And if you are, as Killer Mike said, Killer Mike from Run the Jewel said, Who the hell gonna bully me if I got $1 billion?
Yeah.
Like that's, I mean, for real, like if, and that's, it's actually a great song, but yeah, like his point is like, if I'm super rich, I don't give a shit that somebody's like saying that I'm bad and telling me to do stuff. Like I'm above that. And so, yeah, like Glenn or Andrew Sullivan or Matt Taibbi can do that because they know they have like they'll have like a soft landing. Fine. Like more power to them, I guess. At least they're doing the thing. Like at least they're motherfucking people who deserve to get called out.
Yeah. So look, we're at time. So I wanted to end.
Man.
I wanted to end on one thing,
yeah.
and you don't have to do it, but this is where you get to look like a fucking genius, right? I know there's still a few days left to the election, but
oh my god, am I going? Okay,
it's prediction time.
Okay,
What's going to happen? And I'll just add the caveat that yes, there is crazy shit breaking all the time. I honestly don't think this FBI stuff and the Hunter stuff is really moving the dial all that much. Personally, I think these last appearances are going to have a much more and like endorsements. We're seeing Lil Wayne endorse Trump while we were on this call.
Yeah. Oh, really? That's funny.
Yeah,
there was like a few like athletes, and it's fun. He's getting like rappers, and it's the
rappers are Republicans
taxes,
now. Rappers are Republicans.
It's the
That's
taxes.
where we're
it's
at.
The rappers and the athletes. They're all like,
yeah.
I'll keep my money, thank you.
Yeah. So, I just got to ask. Like, I mean, I know in having watched your stuff previously, you felt Biden was a shoo-in. But
again, I was also asked this question yesterday, and I'm going to say the same thing. My gut says that he's headed for like a big loss, like a crushing loss. But the thing that I don't know is how much of that is influenced by this cloud that I live within. I said it almost feels like this like this aura of energy, this negative energy. So many people have this like wishful. They're applying this like wishful thinking. Lose. Everybody's like has this like narrative going, and I don't know if like I'm getting affected by that and getting that sort of sense of like, oh my god, he's gonna get crushed, because I live within that cloud, and how much of that is like clear-eyed assessment of reality. I will say that I know people who are like involved in this, in campaigns and stuff, like that's what they do. And they're worried, but I don't know if that's just because, everybody's worried that their side's going to lose, because that's like the pre-election being antsy.
Yeah.
I will say this, the thing that I hope, because like I said, I guess my prediction is he's going to lose. Okay, fine. If I got to choose, whatever. My hope is that the result is decisive enough, whatever happens, so that we can at least go like, okay, the election is decided. At least we know who the president is, rather than have it drag out with all kinds of lawsuits and recounts. I don't know if this country can survive a Bush v. Gore now, like a Trump v. Biden. Like, and it would definitely be nice, like if the same person won like the popular vote and the electoral college, again, just to quiet people down. Unfortunately, like I said, because I'm not a Republican and I'm not a Democrat, like a big thing for me is I want things to cool down a little. And so almost any result that might help that is something I'm more invested in. Because some people like you were like, let it be contested. Who gives a shit? Like I'll podcast about it. I live 3 miles from the White House. My life is gonna be awful if that happens.
It sucks for you. If I was still in America, I'd have a very different fucking opinion. I'll tell you that for free. I got friends in New York that are looking to fucking hightail it out of there if Trump wins, because they're expecting riots and
I don't have a set plan, but I do have a car, and I can get in it and drive away.
Yeah, I mean, honestly though, I'm speaking seriously for a moment. Yeah, I do want it to be decisive. I can't it's more about the hand wringing and the pathetic, like, is this fascism that we'll have to go through if, you know, there's any legal component to the results, any legal action as a result of it not being decisive. So yeah,
Yeah. By the way, in that sense, another result that I wouldn't mind at all is like him saying, you know what, I'm not going to leave, and like immediately being like kicked out forcefully. Because the thing that I keep the thing that I hate about those narratives, these like fan fictions about a coup,
the Bill Maher one,
is that for a coup, you need everybody on down from the president to also be on board with the plan. Like, you know what I mean? You need everybody from the president down to the people with the guns standing on the White House lawn and, you know, shooting the people who want to storm the White House and remove Trump forcefully from office. You need them to be on board with such a plan. And so by all accounts, if Trump's like, oh, the election is contested, I'm going to lose, the rest of the country is just going to be like, no.
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Which would be interesting. And so I'm saying, like, that would be good in restoring like the country's mental health, like to see that even if he were to say that, it wouldn't work. Like just to show people that the country could survive a president even trying to think about doing something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I said, I just want things to be a little less crazy.
I don't think you're gonna get that win or lose, because honestly, I have Biden winning by giving him an edge, and I think when the DNC are in, you know, now the next battlefield becomes, I mean, obviously what Trump does on the way out, who fucking knows how that's going to go, you know, what investigations into Biden might open up, and, you know, whatever happens there. But what I think the next battlefield is going to be when the DNC slam the door in the progressive face. You know, what happens when AOC realizes she can't reach Joe Biden, or more realistically Kamala Harris.
And so that's, I mean, I do hope that he, because you're right, there is this whole idea of like, who's gonna shadow puppet, you know, Biden, a Biden presidency. And I do think that there is a chance that what you're saying will happen, which is that they're all going to be sorely disappointed with what like Definitely. A vanilla centrist he'll end up being.
Yeah. Well, because I mean, that is what the establishment Democrats are. You know, they talk about changing things, and they talk about hope and change and all that nonsense, and then you get in, and it's the same old shit. It's a continuation.
Well, one of the smartest things Biden said during that second debate, the one that was actually a debate, was that he was asked something about Bernie Sanders and Kamala Harris and all these people are to your left, and they're to your left and to your left, and Biden said something like, "Yeah, but I beat all of them by like." Not agreeing with that. Yeah. And I'm the nominee now and they're not. And I was like, you know, that's a really strong point. Like people are saying like, oh, these people are going to influence you. And he's like, I mean, maybe, but I was the winner.
Yeah.
I was the person people wanted though.
So I mean, it's crazy. I think I like you say, I think Biden ekes it. I think he just gets the football over the zone and into the touchdown area, and you know, Trump will go and make his new media network. And what will be great, of course, is we'll never have to hear about this fictitious fascist takeover of America that a lot of Americans seem to fantasize about for reasons I don't understand as a European. Yeah. So, you know, I think you're right. I think what like we definitely get to a better place if Trump loses, but the battlefields will just move to other topics. But I think overall, the things that are really annoying us, if you like, at the moment now and are irritating, they go away. But equally, if it's a Trump win, is there any point in continuing to shriek hysterically? Can only serve 4 more years, whatever the Lincoln Project says, with a hilariously bad campaign.
And so if he wins, then now the question is, do the Democrats take the Senate? And if they do, will they impeach him again? Like, let's say for coronavirus,
right?
Which is, you know, like my initial thought was if he wins and they take the Senate, like how is he not getting immediately impeached again?
Yeah.
And you're just going to deal with President Pence for the next 4 years.
Yeah, which apparently, I mean, shouldn't that be worse? I don't know. Like,
it depends. Well, that's the thing. It depends because that's the funny thing is like it depends on who you are. Because Pence is the type of Pence is like a dangerous Republican, meaning he actually believes in a deep way all of the things that Trump doesn't, like social conservatism stuff. and he's also extremely like mild mannered and political in how he speaks. He's always very polite. He's always very nice and smiley. And so he's kind of disarming, but he's a true ideologue, whereas Trump is not. And so pick your poison, right?
Yeah, it's crazy. Well, look, man, I'll put a lid on it there. So I'll put much again like Joe Biden.
Yeah,
These
man.
jokes write themselves. So look, it's been great to talk. Honestly, fantastic conversation. I hope everyone watching the show goes and follows you over at Neontaster. It's exactly how you think it would be spelled. It'll probably be on the screen as well, depending on what my editors do. Is there anything else you want to plug before I let you go?
No, I mean, I'm also on Twitch. I know you do like esports and stuff. I'm on Twitch. I hope to be back more regularly on Twitch after the election. It's twitch.tv/neontaster. Maybe some Among Us coming. I don't know, something like that. I'm eagerly awaiting Age of Calamity, which comes out next month. Because I was a big Breath of the Wild guy. And my YouTube, youtube.com/c/neontaster. It has like old podcasts, and it also has like Twitch streams that I upload to there, like playthroughs of things and whatnot. Thanks so much for having me on.
No worries. I'll shout out Tabletmag as well. It's got some really good articles over there. You got some good writers.
Thank you. Yeah, I love Tablet.
Yeah, I was reading the narcissism of the New York Times foreign coverage.
Oh, there you go. Jacob Siegel, extremely good writer about like technology and like censorship and all the stuff we talked about. He's written a lot of good stuff about that lately.
Yeah. So look, Noam, a real pleasure to everyone watching. There you have it. That is the man, Neontaster. Make sure you go and follow him, support his content. He's a great guy, and if you're interested in what I do, he's been doing it longer than me. He has been infuriated by the media and its nonsense for a much longer time, I think. So there you have it. So as I said, thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next episode of The Richard Lewis Show.